A little over a month ago, we interviewed Professor Nikolai Petrovsky. Nikolai is a Professor of Medicine at Flinders University and the Chairman and Research Director of Vaccine Proprietary Limited. Nikolai's Adelaide-based biotechnology company is focused on vaccine development, and over the last 18 years he's been awarded multiple vaccine research grants from the United States National Institutes of Health. His current focus is on completing clinical trials and development of a protein-based vaccine against COVID-19. Welcome back, Professor.
It's a pleasure.
Now, when we had you on in early July, we discussed your protein-based vaccine. How has it been progressing?
So it's been progressing very rapidly. So we're now in phase 3 clinical trials overseas, which is the last stage before getting approval to make the vaccine widely available. And we've already passed 10,000 subjects recruited and vaccinated in those trials. So we're getting very close to the point where within the next few months, we should be actually getting a preliminary readout on the effectiveness of the vaccine against the virus.
Fantastic. And am I right in saying that you've actually looked at going with an Australian manufacturer?
So we've just announced in the last few days that we're planning to partner with an Australian pharmaceutical company called Aratex. Aratex have just applied to the federal government to build a very large multi-purpose vaccine manufacturing facility in Victoria. And we're strongly supporting and part of that bid because Australia really does need to be secure in the ability to make vaccines, not just for this pandemic as it goes forward, but also for future pandemics.
Now, with regards to some of the developments that have recently happened, we've had the Doherty release their modelling. How do you find that with your expertise?
So, in fact, I've been doing modelling now for more than 25 years. And one of the challenges of models is that they're only as good as the assumptions you put in and feed the model with. And so when we looked at the assumptions that had gone into the Doherty model, particularly on the effectiveness of the existing vaccines in preventing viral transmission, we instantly saw that the assumptions going into those models were way off the mark in terms of what the current evidence is suggesting. And therefore, unfortunately, I don't believe that, that modeling results are reliable given the inputs into those models.
Now, I actually went to the trouble of reading the Doherty report last night in preparation for speaking to you. And what's being portrayed in the media and by the government isn't necessarily what's in the report, where they're talking about 80% vaccination thresholds being some sort of get out of jail card. Am I right in that?
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right. So what we need to realise is that in those models, there's still assumptions that we will be using other methods of controlling the virus. It won't be a matter of just the population reaches 70% vaccination coverage and just everything goes back to normal. We throw away the masks, we get rid of the concept of social isolation, we open the borders, and we stop doing lockdowns if we have local outbreaks. And I think most experts in the field realize that that is simply not going to happen. That, even once we have high levels of vaccination coverage, as we're seeing in Israel, the United Kingdom, for instance, they're still having to pursue masks, social isolation and periodic lockdowns when the virus gets out of control. So you're absolutely right. The media portrayal that we get to this level of vaccination coverage, even if you assume that's correct, which I would in fact question, then in fact, we still have to use those measures in association with vaccination, and hopefully things will ease up. But they're certainly not going to go back completely to normal.
How do we avoid reading that the viral load or the ability to transmit even after being infected hasn't really been diminished with this Delta strain? How do we go about fixing that problem?
So to be honest, we need better vaccines. And, that's what we've been arguing all along. We've been fortunate to have vaccines that are giving some effects, particularly reducing the risk of serious disease and deaths. But the current vaccines, where their weakness is that they're not so good at preventing infection and blocking transmission. And so, I guess we shouldn't be over-reliant on them. Yes, they're a good tool to get us to this point, but we need to be investing heavily in the next generation of vaccines with the aim that they be much more effective and that they might be able to allow life to go back to normal. But we're just not seeing that happen in Australia. The government seems to have just sort of accepted these vaccines are good enough and we're not going to invest in any new technologies.
How are we going with using case number as the dependency for controlling what we do, in your opinion?
So case number is a complex concept because it depends how you measure it. And obviously we know that, for instance, PCR tests, can be set to be incredibly sensitive. And they'll even pick up people who are no longer infectious, but they'll show up as a case. So when we talk about how we measure cases, it really depends on the test we're using and how we interpret the results from those tests. Conversely, we may have a less sensitive test and it shows up people to be negative when in fact they're infected. And we saw that very early in the pandemic. Probably, if anything, the number of cases were being underestimated. The question now is, in some cases, are cases being overestimated? But again, these are very complex issues and they shouldn't be oversimplified. And again, the danger is that, if you do oversimplify them, you end up making the wrong assumptions and you make the wrong decisions. And so everything has to be very nuanced here, because COVID is a really complex beast, and we can't make these simple assertions. We get to 70%, we can go back to normal. If we use this vaccine, this will be the outcome. Again, there's so much uncertainty around this that we have to be honest and actually, pursue science to reduce the uncertainty. So what we need right now is a massive investment in science, massive investment in new vaccine technologies, and a massive investment in building new manufacturing capability to make those vaccines. But we're not seeing any of those signals coming from the government. And, again, their assumption the problem is almost over is so far from the truth. The truth is, we're halfway into a pandemic. The worst may still be yet to come, unfortunately. We simply cannot say, that we're on the tail end, we're almost through this. And I think we have to be honest with the population and tell them, look, it may get better, it may get worse, but what the government should be doing is, look, we're investing everything we can in trying to move forward and find every solution possible, that we're not just going to sit on our seats and say we've already got a solution, problem solved.
How do you feel about the government's quality of information and guidance they're receiving from their experts? Have they cast the net any wider? Have they looked outside of their already entrenched attack on it?
Well, our experience, I guess, is that unfortunately the government is very reliant on just a few close advisors. We would like to see much more consensus building across the whole scientific community. And obviously the great thing about science is you get so many different opinions. And then when scientists come together, they argue through all of those opinions, and ultimately out of that, you may get actually quite a strong consensus. But if you only listen to one group of scientists who have one opinion, it may turn out that they are the ones who are wrong, and the others who are on the other side of the camp who should be in there debating are actually not being listened to. And that's very dangerous for a government to embark on a course where they only listen to one group of scientists telling them one thing, rather than saying, let's go out there, find the detractors, find the people who are challenging, our advisors and obviously don't agree with them. And let's find out why they don't agree. Maybe they have something that's worth listening to. Maybe our advisors aren't as perfect as our advisors think they are. And these other scientists with other opinions may have something to add, that might shape the way we approach this in the future.
You've had interest from multiple countries from all around the world. Any from the Australian government?
No, so as you say, we're currently engaged in discussions. We've already signed agreements with a number of governments overseas, and this is increasing all the time. Just in the last week, we've been in contact with the government of Vietnam, who are very interested in looking at our technology and potentially taking it to Vietnam. So this just adds to the list. The unfortunate thing is the one country that's not on that list right now is Australia.
The Australian government seems to be wedded to their policy, and it seems to be an inability to admit not even that they're wrong, but they may be looking at things outside of it. Is that playing into the problem?
Look, yeah, I don't know what is the cause of the problem, with the government, and why, they are like this. I mean, they may feel that, they don't need to take advice from outside, that they've got the perfect solutions, and, they just want clarity on that. But, as I say, it is unfortunate, because I think that they are dismissing a lot of, valuable opinions and projects that could help us to get through, this pandemic.
Now, your vaccine that you're developing, it's not of the same source as the mRNA. It's a synthetic protein, which is, am I correct in saying it's the old style of vaccine development?
Well, it's the new old style. So the really old style vaccines are the inactivated viruses. And, we're seeing a lot of those coming out of China and India, for instance. Ours is a synthetic protein, which is a more modern technique and much more pure. But, we've been using this approach for vaccines for decades now. And for instance, the very successful human papillomavirus vaccine against cervical cancer, that Australia contributed to the development of, is essentially the same technology. It's a synthetic protein approach. So we know that this approach is exceptionally safe and exceptionally successful, as we've seen with the eradication effectively of cervical cancer using that vaccine. So at the moment, there's no approved synthetic protein vaccine for COVID-19, and that's what's lacking, and that's the hole that we're seeking to fill with our vaccine.
Right. Next stage for you, Nikolai, what should we look for?
Well, it's, really more of the same. Obviously we need to get our vaccine approved, and I'm sure that will happen overseas first. We'll then look to expand its manufacturing and its approval in other overseas countries who are all already partnering with us. So it's our responsibility, obviously, to look after those countries first. And we're still waiting for that phone call, from the Australian government to say, look, we'd be interested in also, if your vaccine is approved, in sourcing that and making that available in Australia. But as I say, we'll wait for that phone call.
All right, Nikolai, sit by that phone. Hopefully that call comes soon, because I'm sure it would relieve a lot of the hesitancy and doubt that we're seeing with the current vaccines. So thanks so much for coming on the Informer again, and I'll look forward to hearing from you again.
It's a pleasure.